Welcome everyone to another Dynatrace Community Practice Observability Clinic. This is episode 4, where we learn about ping monitoring, RUM troubleshooting, and pure path diagnostics. And as always with these sessions, I'm inviting the people that use Dynatrace on a day-to-day basis. These are the true Dynatrace community rock stars. And today I want to welcome Antonio. Antonio, thank you so much for being here. Can you maybe introduce yourself quickly, what you do, who you are?
Hi, Andy. Thanks for having me. I'm CTO for Marketware. It's a Portuguese company. We've been a Dynatrace partner for a long time now, since 2016. And so we work primarily with important customers here in Portugal, where we provide them our knowledge in Dynatrace. We are also a company that specializes in doing some integrations with Dynatrace. So we extend the Dynatrace offering for our customers. And that's one of the points that we are talking here today. So basically, that's it.
That's it. Perfect. That's so much. I'm looking forward to it. Especially, I love all of these 3 topics. My favorite probably is going to be the pure path diagnostics, because I did a lot of pure path diagnostics in my life at Dynatrace. But Antonio, please take it away. Give us an overview of what people will learn, and then we jump into each section.
Okay, so for starting, we will start with the ping every second extension. That's an extension that runs on active gates. And so basically it permits us to get the detailed information about what is going on in the network on a second basis or so. The resolution is 1 second. Then we will talk a little bit about something that sometimes happens when we install Dynatrace and put the RUM working. Sometimes applications stop working. We'll talk a little bit about it and how we can get around it. The spoiler at the moment, almost never, or I've never had a case where it's Dynatrace faults, but the applications have some things that don't work. So we'll be talking a little bit about it. And then the last part, the one that you mentioned, we'll be talking a little bit about the best of diagnostics. So a very quick way, it's going to be really quick to find out those pure paths that maybe have something wrong with them. So this is basically the 3 points we have today, Andy.
Perfect. Well, then let's jump right into it. Let's start with pinging every second.
So let's do it. So as I told you, the ping every second is an activated extension. It's available through the Dynatrace Hub, so you can download it. And it only installs at the moment on Linux Activate. So it's a restriction at the moment because in Windows, it doesn't have the detailed the precision that we really need in terms of networks. And in the cases of our clients, most of them use Linux anyway. It really uses the ping system command, so to get the detailed information that we want, and it basically gives us the round trip time. So sometimes we talk about latency. Latency is the time from one place to the other. Ping gives us the round trip time, so the time it goes from a client to a server, and then the time it comes back. It's very used by network people, but today it's very important because there are some use cases that we'll be talking in a few moments. It's based on a 1 second resolution, so that's a little bit typical for Dynatrace extensions, which typically run each minute. We don't really grab all the data for each second. We basically summarize it in statistical terms each minute, with the minimum, the average, and the maximum values. We also have the count for availability. Each point only consumes 2 data points, one for RTT, so for the round trip time, and the other one for the availability. It's also very good, and our clients use it for SLO and SLA stuff, because having network connections sometimes is very important to have a service level agreement. It's based on the SLOs, and this is basically the SLIs that we can use for these type of metrics. It works for both SaaS and managed environments. We're working with clients in both of them. We should say that there is traffic going on. So this is not a lot of traffic. It's about 5 megabytes of traffic a day. We can reduce that information a little bit, but it really depends on the links. So probably the best way is to just practice with the ping system command. And eventually you can also do it with large volumes of data, so you get the delta between the 2 measurements. And of course, it also consumes DDUs, but it's very, very less. At the moment, it's only 2 data points per minute, so 1,000 DDUs per year, which is really quite a small amount. You can do a lot of measurements with ping every second without consuming a lot of DDUs. So basically, the importance here is that in 1 minute, if we do the ping like every 1 minute, it's probably not enough. During a whole minute, sorry, the network latency and of course the availability might vary very widely. So you can have like 1 second or 2 seconds where a lot of traffic is going on, the latency will go up. And basically it can vary very significantly during 1 minute. And it's also a very important thing in terms of availability. So if you want to like get the 9 5s that are typical network operations, so you only want to like be down like 5 minutes during a year or something like that, you have to measure it very precisely because you can only get 5 nines of availability when you do at least 100,000 measurements. And instead of taking like 50 or 60 days, if you do it every minute or so, you can do this in a little bit more than a day. So with 28 hours of data, we can get you to those 100,000 measurements. And so this is an important thing. So you get a very good resolution of what is going on. Of course, you can tweak a little bit what you want. You don't need to do the 60 measurements a minute. You can do less. You can eventually even do more. We've not tried it, but it can be done. Please be aware that everyone using this extension, that using ping ICMP, does have its drawbacks. Sometimes it's not a clear indicator of latency, so you have to be particularly careful. And of course, you cannot do it when the remote system doesn't reply to ping. So eventually you'll have to like check if it pings from the operating system at first. So our clients use it for a lot of cases. First and most important case here in Portugal is the latency to the cloud. So typically AWS and Azure are like in Paris, which is like the shortest path that you have to a cloud here in Portugal. Google Cloud is already in Madrid, but it takes like 30, 40 milliseconds to do a round trip time to the cloud. And today we have a lot of clients that when migrating to the cloud, like the times go up very clearly because latency also goes up. So we can check how it really works to the cloud. You can have latency between data centers, latency to a specific server. That's the one we're going to check today live. And you can also, I'm going to give like an example, detect changes in link characteristics. Well, there are so many use cases that these are only for them. So for instance, this is the last one I referenced. This is a connection from a client where we see the minimum value in green. So this is the minimum value. It's around, in this case, about 40, 41 milliseconds. We can see that the average ping is very near, which means that these variations in the max ping per minute is really one or two, probably two measurements that are going this high. Not very high in this case because we're talking about milliseconds. But what we see here is that during about 10 minutes, the link characteristics were changed. So we went from something like 40 milliseconds to something about 60 or 60 and something. And this, of course, is like almost a 50% increase in latency. So when you do like TLS connections, when you do anything that goes through this connection, in this case, you'll get more timing here because everything that you do on the internet multiplies by the latency. So you have the TCP connection, the SSL, just to get the gets probably 5 round trip times. So this thing takes times at least like 100 milliseconds above what they were normally. And so it's an important thing to see. And we can correlate that data inside to Dynatrace. So if we see a spike in timing, we can associate this with this part of the network latency. We also have here like another example that I can show live in a little moment. And this is like the availability for 1 week, where we can get like to 99.971%. But then when we see it here in detail, we have here the number of successful pings and the availability here. And we can see that during 1 minute, the availability was not 100 nor 0%. In fact, you can know how many failed because knowing how many successful pings, multiplying this by the availability can bring you to an exact value of how many pings failed during 1 minute. Not every minute has 60 measurements. You know, there might be a minute where we count one or less. It really depends on how the extension is running. So this is not the availability, because the availability is 100%. Typically, you get 60 measurements per minute. Sometimes you might get 59. And you can see here that in terms of timings, it's also very high in these periods. So this means that there was a failure here in availability, and there were also spikes in terms of timings. This was a real case that happened some days ago for us here in our company. So it was really a connection problem to the ISP. And so another example we have here, and this is an example that we did some months ago, and we keep on working because it's a good example. We had some, well, I had to do some reasoning about which DNS servers to use. So the Quad 1, the Quad 8 for Cloudflare and Google. And we were like, we didn't have a decision of which one really to use. So we put this up and running to get like which were like the values that were going on. And so we have here the three of them together, where we can, it's not three because this one is our router. So it's the 192.168.1.1. So this is very fast because it's our router. And this is the Quad 1, and this is the Quad 8. Okay, and so eventually you know who we decided for. Also for the average values to see if they are a little bit different. And then what we did is for both of them, we put here with the red, blue, the green, blue, red, and also the spikes were not that different. So we then compared the values, and it's quite an easy and interesting way to check out really which service. In this case, it's a DNS service, but we could check out like HTTP or whatever things that we want. We've also done some cases like where, for instance, we want to tweak the network stack for an equipment. We put it running like to a fixed equipment, a router, something very near, and then we tweak the servers and see if the timings go up and down. So it's another use case to check if we have that service is running better or not, depending on the configuration, the distance, the factors that you want to analyze. And so let's do some demo on this. I don't know if you have any questions here.
No questions. I'm just fascinated because I think what you're doing here is some really basic groundwork necessary for performance engineering, especially as you are moving to more distributed systems, especially if you're moving to the cloud and you don't move everything to the cloud, but if you have a hybrid setting, doing the ground and basic work of what's the latency, what are my better cloud services to use, like you with the DNS testing that you just did. This is fascinating, and it's great that you show us all these different use cases. So latency to the cloud, latency between services, latencies to a particular services is, thank you for that educational piece. This is really great.
Yeah, I would just add one thing that is important. I think I didn't say it. The latency to the cloud is particularly important here in Portugal because it's far away. It might not be, for instance, for a company based in Paris, where the connection to the Paris cloud is quite fast, of course. But anyway, if we want to optimize and engineer the connections, as you told, it's an interesting tool to get some data out. Just not have like some idea, but have some quite quick metrics about which one is really running better. So we've got here how to do this integration quite easily. We're using the system ping command. So I'm going to, from our ActiveGate, we're doing this in a managed environment. I'm going to check how far away the managed server is. So I'm going to ping from the ActiveGate to the Dynatrace managed node. And so I've got here set up the ping command. I'll just explain a little bit how it does, because we have to run the ping command. It has to do with the amount of permissions that it is needed in Linux to send ICMP packets. So Dynatrace doesn't run as root. We're trying to figure out how to put this really directly into the extension and the extension managing it. But at the moment, it's done through the system terminal. So we have to guarantee that the ping command will not stop. And then we put here some characteristics like doing a timestamp, getting sure that when the ping does not reply, that it gives a specific string to say that it has not been answered. And well, the rest, this is important, the size, because typically I believe it sends like 64 bytes. So just to minimize the amount of data that is being put in, you can put here. But eventually you can also put here like a bigger value and see the differences between the two, because that can also give you some insight on how the network is behaving. So this is the destination. This is our managed server. And then I'm putting this into a file. And it is this file that the Activate extension will be reading. Okay, so of course I have to do, oh, sorry, because I have to remove here some things because I didn't experience previously. And I didn't take out the files that were there.
That's all good. That means we are doing this live, kind of, even though people will watch this later on.
Okay, so here we go. Okay, so it's putting the file there. And now I'm also going to quickly run here to be sure that the Activate can read this file. So we can see it. It's, of course, a very simple ping that starts. I'm going to put here like a till and a sif, just to be sure that everything is running. So you see it's running. And these are the values that we are going to grab. So I'm going back to my I manage tenant. And so basically we have to install the extension first. So as I told you, it's available in the Dynatrace hub. So you can go there and download it from GitHub. And then basically after installation, we just have to come here and put the data in what we want to do. So this will make the association between what we are doing at the Activate and the configuration here. As you can see, these are the three ones that I've showed you. They've already configured. And so I'm going to add here, well, I'm just going to put the same name. I could put whatever name I could here. I'm going to put it also in the ping address. I didn't have to put the tenant. So the tenant is the thing that we have here. If you're using SaaS, it will be the thing before the demo.live, sorry, the live.dynatrace.com. So it's typically 3 letters and 5 numbers. I've got put here the token. This is a managed environment. It's not accessible from the internet. And they're not going to see, no one is going to see the whole API token. So you have to be careful with security when you do these demo lives. And we can even put some demo here, debug level. I really have 2 Activate, so I'm going to choose the one where I install it, and I'm going to do the add endpoint. So it's going to connect. And in a few seconds, I believe we should have the thing running. So the file has been truncated. And I would say that we already have data. Let's go check it out. So I still have here the dashboards that I put in the slides. So this is real data coming in from the same use case that I told you about the 2 DNS resolvers. Well, this was the example also on the slides. So you can see that here we can see the amount of availability. It was 4.9%. It really had 3 measurements in the 61, so that gives you the amount of percentage. And here is, of course, you can see and create all the dashboards that you want. These are dashboards that we have configured by default for us. In this case, this is one that I can use the filters for the dashboards, and I can come here and say I want to do this one. I could do this in some other way, but this typically shows us the information. So it still hasn't come in if I have run everything correctly. Might take a little bit more. So what time is it? Okay. I would say it should be here already.
And while we're waiting, just for people that are watching this, I will put the link to your ping plugin, your ping extension into the description of the clinic, because you can find it on the hub very easily if you just search for ping. But just to let you know, if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're watching this on Dynatrace University, there's also a link to the extension in the description of the show.
Okay, so this number of successful pings has gone up, so I believe it's already there. Let's check it just one more time. No, still not. Oh, here it is. Or is it not? No.
I think you got a special filter maybe on your individual charts. Could that be possible that that filter is excluding it?
Not sure. We'll come back probably a little bit later.
But maybe do
because
me
the
a
value.
favor, maybe Antonio, do me a favor, just go quickly to the metrics screen in
Oh,
Dynatrace, right? I think that's
yeah.
always the easiest.
Okay. I'll have to search it here.
Exactly.
So if you search like for ping every second, you get here. I'm going to check only the round trip time. Okay, it's gone down, so it's clearly incorporating the new data. I'm going to split here by an endpoint. Okay, and here you have it.
Yeah,
okay, so it's
perfect.
that one here in the bottom. It's very, very fast. Well, because it's from the active gate to the Dynatrace server.
Yeah.
So in fact, really, there's something in the dashboard, but we've got data here for 2 minutes already. Yeah.
Perfect. This is really cool. And Antonio, again, I have to say, I'm really fascinated about not only that you have this plugin, but the use cases that you explained, that everyone that wants to, first of all, move to the cloud, or not only just moving their stuff to the cloud, but also leveraging cloud services, just like do your homework, figure out how fast this is, what's your latency, what's your throughput, because with, I think what you mentioned, with the package size, you can also measure a little bit of throughput, kind of a little bit, yeah?
Yeah. It works better on lower throughputs.
Yep.
If it's a very large throughput, you will not notice the difference, but when you have limited bandwidth, you will notice the difference.
Yeah. Awesome. Really cool. And folks, try out this plugin and give Antonio feedback on it. And anything else on this, or let's move to the next topic?
Yeah, there will be a post in the community about this, so you can chime in there and eventually get live or talk about your use cases, or if you need help, we'll be there to help you guys.
Perfect. I will also make sure to have the link to the community post on the description. Thank you.
Okay, so next one is, well, this is a very interesting one because I was not sure if it was interesting to talk about this, but it really gives us some, well, it's a little bit scary, when we install Dynatrace, do like a POC or install it for a client and then it breaks something. You're so used to using Dynatrace without problems, but every time there comes a time where something might go wrong. And we had several use cases in the past. Well, the first one was a little bit painful because it took us a lot of time. The third one that I'm going to talk about was also much interesting, but eventually we have used it for several times now. So it's been like interesting. And the thing that happens is that whenever we activate RUM, so the real user monitoring Dynatrace, not the one agent part, but the one that changes and gives us automatically the information from the real users, we have had cases where Dynatrace has break the application. And so we had to figure out what was happening. Was it Dynatrace faults? Because the first test that the clients want to do is, okay, so we have a problem, so disconnect Dynatrace again. And it starts working again. So it's something that is a little bit painful. And we normally have to find out what is really happening here. So basically, we had some cases in the past where it's happened. I'm going to put here some spoilers before I talk a little bit about it. So the first case several years ago, it was really an old application. And what we discovered afterwards was that the application was reading like the 6th header in the HTTP request. So the request, no, sorry, the reply. And Dynatrace was putting there some HTTP headers, but the application was looking for the 6th one, and the 6th one was not the one that they were expecting because Dynatrace had put there an HTTP header. So it's pretty HTTP standard. You put in headers or you take them out, but you should never ever look at them in order because they can be in a non-ordered fashion. Well, first you have to have that HTTP whatever version it is, like 200, okay, but whatever goes downwards typically doesn't have a specific order. And so in this case, the application had to be like corrected, not to read the 6th header, but to read correctly the header that they want. The second one was a very interesting one because it's an important platform out there. And basically the first time we instrumented it, it stopped working. And eventually we figured out that what was happening was that that platform had like a timer that every minute was testing a specific page. I've identified it here as like test page.aspx, so it's not the real page here. But after Dynatrace was injecting the RUM, the JavaScript into the HTML, this control application would not be getting the exact HTML that it was looking for, because it was looking like byte for byte. If it had that specific HTML, it would be okay. If you put anything there different, it starts misbehaving. And so basically in this case, it was like pretty easy to do it afterwards. And we've run into this several times. You just say to Dynatrace, just don't inject this test page.aspx and everything is okay. Two more use cases that we've had in the past. One of them is like the good application was running good in a pre-production environment. And then when we would put it in production, it would stop working. So in this case, what we detected was that the application was really messing up with the cookies, not the headers at this time, but the cookies. They were like slicing the cookies and then putting them back together not correctly. And so basically what has had to be done in this case was that the cookie management for the application had to be rewritten. And so the last one was about a specific web application that was only misbehaving some 2 hours after the RUM instrumentation. So this one was quite also interesting because there was not a direct action. What we discovered afterwards is that in certain cases, certain objects, mainly CSS, were becoming corrupt afterwards because they were passing through a varnish cache that was like not correctly configured. And so it was breaking too, because when the CSS would break, all of the UI in the pages would break too. So these were the 4 cases that we had till the moment. Some of them took us quite some time to diagnose, just to prove that it was not our fault, Dynatrace's fault, but something had to be done with the applications. Well, the second one, number 2, the test page, there we just took the quick solution to just not inject it and everything was okay. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about some options that we have when we are tackled with this type of problems, and some of the configurations that we can do in Dynatrace to help us find out what might eventually be happening in these situations. So in this case, the first one I would suggest is the observability clinic that you did with Julius about a month ago, just to verify that RUM is really working and it's not something else. So there's a link here to check it out because it's an important checklist that you have to do to make sure that RUM is working. One of the best things that I think in Dynatrace we can do to check this out is to really include or exclude IPs from monitoring. So if you, like, for instance, you have a fixed IP where you're doing the test from, you just say in Dynatrace, I just want to inject the pages that are coming from this specific IP. So it's very interesting because you can do the testing. Eventually, even before you notice that something might break, just to be sure that everything is working. So that, I would say, is one of the best options to start with. Then another thing that we usually do is to define the application individually. Don't let it run automatically from the My Web application because you might have to like disconnect everything in the My Web application. So one of the tricks we do is like inject the RUM into one specific page. You say, I want to inject it only into this page and check out if it's working. That's how we figured out number 2. I'm talking about the use cases. The people that are seeing this can go back and check which one is, but it's the one about the test page. So we started like with everything that has ASPX, it breaks. Okay, so let's start with index.aspx. Okay, it doesn't break. So we quickly can figure out that we can like start RUM and not break it. And then sometimes we have to go to the services level to check out what type of requests are being made to try to identify the ones that might be breaking. So basically it's a quick test. We go to the services, okay, what type of pages do we have and what type of logic we can do. Of course, for this test page, knowing in advance it's test page.aspx, it's easy, but if you don't know it, you just have like to go binary and try to inject half of the pages, see if it breaks, and if it doesn't, try to figure out from there how you can figure out what the offending page might be. Of course, it might not be a page, it might be a set of pages, but that's the idea, just to get them to start or to stop misbehaving. Of course, disabling XHRs is also a possibility. A lot of times you might have some things like MIME types in some type of behavior. You might be having like XHRs that are not JSON and are like returning HTML. It might be dangerous because Dynatrace might try to inject that. So if you have problems with XHR, you can try disabling in session replay also. But I think that's not the normal thing that will happen, because these are the things that are not on by default. So probably just will have to have this type of problems eventually after putting RUM in. So it's not one of the most obvious ones. One of the most interesting ones that we've had the chance to use is the enable opt-in. So because of privacy issues, we can say to the application that only the users that opt in will be analyzed in RUM. But this has a special implication when we try out these type of tricks, is that the opt-in means that the HTML will be injected on the server side. The JavaScript that is referenced in the HTML injection that was made will also be downloaded from the server and executed, but the data from RUM will not be sent back to Dynatrace. So that means that injection is going on, that it is running on the client browser, but only the data is not going back. So this was essential, for instance, for number 4, the use case number 4 that I mentioned, because this wouldn't break the application. So we just put this in and it started working. So it's a very interesting combination. Firstly, we thought that it was something like client side, because there can be interactions with JavaScript on the client side. But once we knew that it was being downloaded, it was being injected, and it was being run on the client, on the browser, and it was not creating problems. So like almost 50% of the RUM injection was out and not responsible for the problem. At this level, you can also do some interesting things, is that you can go to the console on the developer tools and also play with the DT-RUM global object, where you can like do enables and disables and play a little bit with JavaScript if you know the JavaScript API for RUM and Dynatrace. So there are some things that you can do there. Also at the browser level, because there, as I said, there could be interactions at the browser level. You can also say that certain URLs do not download it. So you can block, for instance, the download of the JavaScript from Dynatrace, and that might be another way to figure out if the JavaScript being executed on the client might be a problem or not. So it's like disabling the RUM trajectory, like a little bit at a piece, where we can like take slight bits out, and if it starts or it stops working after that, you get an idea that it might be where the problem is happening. And so another interesting one, because of course browsers have different types of JavaScript engines, you can really say in Dynatrace that we want to inject or not certain types of browsers. So if we have an idea that this is being break, like in an Internet Explorer, internal application, or whatever type of browser it may be, we can try enabling or disabling the browsers per application. We'll be talking a little bit in a moment how we can do all these things. I'll not be going through them all, but in the application configuration permissions that we can change each application, we can do all of these changes. And so another thing that we can do is we can tell Dynatrace how to inject the JavaScript in the pages. So it might also change the behavior. In this case, we've never had one case, but I imagine that this is one of the most interesting combinations that we can use. We can say by default it's the one agent JavaScript tag, but we can put it inline, we can put code snippet, so we can change this, and something like this can change the behavior of the application. You might also be probably looking at something that is client side, and it might be misbehaving from the client side perspective. We can also say it from Dynatrace where we want to inject it. If we don't want to inject it like in the beginning of the page, we can eventually put it somewhere specific in the page. So these are all combinations that we can use to check out if it is really needed. I believe this option is important if we discover that one of these combinations might also be interesting in creating or resolving the problem. Of course, we also have another interesting option is that if we like have some idea that it might be something on the server side from the one agent injection, we can always try the agentless RUM. But as we all know, doing agentless RUM, we have to change the application or eventually use some type of tag management, so it might clearly not be available. And so this is like almost one of the last resort things that we resort to see if it really solves the problem. And I would say that there is, of course, our support. They have some quite neat tricks. Julius talked about one of them in the observability clinic, but of course, some more debug can be put on from support. As I told you, these are normally when, and I've only had these 4 cases in the past, but when this happens, it's like a little bit stressing. And so I believe support is here to help you guys when eventually you need something like this. Don't know if you have any questions here.
No, I think for me, I've been doing RAM for quite a couple of years, even before the current Dynatrace evolution with AppMon, when we had user experience monitoring. And I think the product by default now is handling a lot of these situations automatically, because our engineers put a lot of thought into how we inject so that we don't break things. But things can still go wrong because there's so many different applications out there. And I just find it fascinating that you are sharing this back to the community so that in the problems that you run into, others won't run into. And I can just repeat myself, it's just great to have people like you and all the others as well that have been part of my clinic series, that they just, I think the time frame is the problem on the top. I just saw it. You see that?
Oh my.
Sometimes it's good to have 4 eyes on it, right? If it's
Oh yes,
there we
you're
go.
totally right. Here we go. Yeah.
Now I feel less stupid, because I always that the bigger the product becomes, the more, not stupid, but more less knowledgeable I feel that I am, because there's so many things. But this is why it's great to bring experts in like you that show us these things. But sometimes I spot things like the wrong time frame. That's good to know.
Yeah, because I was not figuring out it was okay here. Why was it not okay here?
Yeah.
So you see here, this is 1 millisecond. Network when you're connected to the same switch is really fast. So we've got here the possibility like looking at 100 microseconds. So we get the detail here from network. So what eventually I could do here, if I had some need for that, I could tweak the network stack. I could tweak some things that could eventually bring this even lower down. Just to talk a little bit more about this, one other use case that I had was checking the latency between availability zones in one of the cloud vendors. So checking out which were the differences between the 3 availability zones that were possible in this case in West Europe. So that's another use case for this. But going back to the second topic, where do we get the possibilities of changing all this information? So I'm doing this on the demo live environment. In here, you can check out the application, the addition of the settings for each, and basically they are out here. I'm not going to show them all, but for instance, data privacy here has the one that is the opt-in. So it's a little bit disguised here. And there, of course, the injection ones. So the one for telling where should the tags in the JavaScript be put. So basically they are all here in the application settings, except the one that defines the number of pages, where you have to go to the place where we define the applications. I'm not sure if I have access. I'm talking about it, but I don't have access from here.
That's fine.
to the location where you define the rules for each of the applications. So it's pretty quick to do it from the screenshots. The people that want to try it out should figure it out quite easily. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And kind of this concludes the topic of troubleshooting RAM. I think there's one more, and this is the one that I said in the beginning. I am very excited about. It's the best of PurePath diagnostics. It's a cool topic. Enlighten us.
Yeah. So how did this start? Well, it started about 6 months ago. here in my team, we were like discussing with a client. We had just figured out an enormous pure path, but we're just a little bit joking about the worst pure path we had seen till the day. And me and Pedro, who was on the call, we couldn't agree with which one was really the biggest or the best example. So we started like our top of the worst pure paths that we could detect. And then we did some investigation for some of our clients. And well, all of them agreed that it was quite useful to know because we've had some very interesting sessions where like the pure paths would just keep popping up. And really, really bad examples. I can tell you, for instance, the first that started this was like a page that was doing a non-stop query to the database to figure out when would that field in the database would change. It was like doing a select, and then like half a millisecond afterwards, it would just do select. It was about 700 or 800,000 usual select to the database to get something like to know if something had changed in the database. Mm-hmm. There should be other ways of doing this, mm-hmm. but that's how we started this. And basically, we've been collecting some examples. They're not easily seen here because we're talking about services in database calls. Mm-hmm. The biggest at the moment is the one with 2.6 million calls to a database for a web page. So it's a web page that would take 84 minutes to complete. Someone had to wait a long time, but in the meantime, it was wasting or doing like 2.6 million calls to a database. And the most interesting part here is that Dynatrace grabbed them all, and the people from the monitoring team could immediately figure out what the problem was. So this was immediately corrected, and basically it was not known as a problem, but it was after the strategy that I'm going to show you all in a moment. So I've got some examples here because it's not only like pages, web pages, you also have web services. You sometimes also have like custom services, like for instance, when you instrument like a method or something like a batch processing event, like something doing, for instance, a monthly invoicing, well, that can really bring you a lot of database calls or even service calls. Mm-hmm. But that's basically the interest here, is figuring out rapidly and quickly which examples these might be. So I believe the best interest or the most interesting thing is just to jump in and demo this. Mm-hmm. It's not really a very difficult thing. So I'm going to start here. And one of the things that Dynatrace has is the distributed traces. So here we can see all the traces that are going on in our environment. We can also do this at the service level. We don't have to do it on a global basis. But if we want to like fish in the pond and catch the biggest one, the idea here is like doing this type of screen, but with two simple tricks. The first one is like filtering for something bigger. And as you can imagine, I've tried this before. I'm on the demo environment. So this is the Dynatrace easy travel environment. And what I suppose it's being programmed right. Not like some cases I see in clients, but here we go. So I'm going to filter for a range, and I'm going to say that I want all pure paths that have more than 100 calls to a database. Okay, so this quickly joins, but we have to get all the information from, and then we have here the pure paths. So the second part of the trick that really also kicks this off is that Dynatrace tells us that we can configure the columns that you want. And so I'm going to say, I want to know for each pure path how many calls there are to the database. So I'm going to do this, and immediately it points them here. And so I know for each one how many calls to the database there are. And so quickly for this time frame, 2 hours, I just have to order this. And I get to know that the worst offender at the moment made 689 queries to the database. And here I go. I don't know which is the URL, find locations. So I've got here the amount of queries being made to the database. I know you love this one, Andy, because this is the N+1 problem or something like it, because it's always the same query, I believe. Yeah. I'm not sure since this is a demo environment, someone did it on purpose.
No, it's
Just to
unfortunate. I
showcase
mean,
it.
yeah, it may have been on purpose, but the thing is, I see this still, even after so many years talking about the N+1 query problem. It's just one way to iterate through a result list and then fetching more details. And depending on how you've implemented your data access layer, I typically also highlight frameworks like Hibernate, which are great and generic, but in order to be optimized for your particular environment, you can optimize it through configuration settings. And when you end up with 1,000, 10,000, or like you had 2.5 million database calls, then there's probably a lot of room for improvement, especially if you go back to your first example you had today with latency. If you think about that, maybe you're putting your front end into the cloud and your backend is still a backend database. And if you have 2.5 million round trips, then every milliseconds of latency will count and will kill you in the end. And that's not what we want. And this is why I really love it, the way you showed it here. I like the trick of going into distributed traces. I know you said you could also go to the services view first, but I like.
So besides the database, we can do this one. We can do this for a lot of things, of course, like the database rows affected by execution. But in this case, I'll do it for services, and I'll just check in this case because normally services, there's no such, not so many invocations. So I'm going to put here more than 10. Okay, so we still, well, we have too much. Okay, it's just an example. Instead of putting calls to database, I'm going to put here the calls to services. Okay, I'm going to take out the call. Well, I'm just leaving the two because you can have both of them. And then here we just use the same trick. And in this case, it's cart. It has 24 calls to services. And basically, it's a quick way, half a minute. You've got a good example of a pure path that is doing a lot of calls here. Not sure if they are all needed to, but it's really quite easy with Dynatrace to just like go get them.
Mm-hmm. Really cool. So, and I think that I will also, folks, I will point to a couple of my older blog posts that I wrote about doing pure path diagnostics. I did a lot of pure path diagnostics over the years, and I think what you just showed is a great reminder of how easy it is to really find transactions, distributed traces that have a bad pattern included, and then drill down to it. That's really good.
Okay, so here you have it. 3 use cases from the community. So look there to check for eventually more. And it's 3 use cases that eventually people can use in their environments, in their clients too.
Exactly. Antonio, do me a favor, go to one more slide. I think the last one is kind of the overview of our name again. Here we go. Thank you so much for doing this. I can encourage all of you out there. I know there's a lot of people that are using Dynatrace on a day-to-day basis. You have your tips and tricks. Feel free to contact me and say, hey, Andy, I would also like to show what I'm doing every day, the little tips and tricks in Dynatrace that maybe not everybody know. But today, thank you so much, Antonio. I learned a lot, and I would like to ask permission from you to write a blog post about the network use cases. I think this would be great to do a blog post on the different use cases, because I hear more and more people being concerned about latency problems between their data center and the cloud services. So I think we could do a little blog write-up as well together.
Seems good to me.
Yeah, awesome. With this, thank you, and see you on the next community episode or wherever else we meet.
Thank you, Andy.
Bye-bye.